We'd like to introduce you to the WAGO DALI Configurator in this video. To do this, we'll set up a small-scale DALI system. A WAGO controller is located here at the center, with a standard Ethernet controller on the left and two DALI power supply modules. And up here we have two DALI multi-master modules. Here you see the cable for the DALI sensors and actuators that we have connected to the first DALI module for our demonstration, along with all the DALI devices installed down here. First we have the LEDs, which are all controlled individually via the DALI electronic ballasts. We then have the DALI motion and brightness sensors, and here, behind each switch, is a DALI button interface with 4 channels, with 2 of these channels connected directly. In this demonstration, we want to show you how we can switch and dim the lighting separately for 2 rooms. This is the larger room, room 1, with 4 lights, and next, this room 2 with 2 lights. We want to show you how we can switch the lights on and off and brighter and dimmer in room 1 using the first switch, and activate a light scene using the second switch, and then do exactly the same for room 2. That is, switch the light on-off, brighten dim, and call activate a light scene. Now, we can begin working with the WAGO DALI Configurator. In the first step, we'll define the communication settings for the system. Here, we'll be conducting communication via Ethernet. In this field, you have to define the IP address for the device. I can also select the DALI multi-master module here that we wish to communicate with. Now I begin the process by clicking on the Connect button. The bar at the bottom right shows that a process is in progress. I'm shown that the process was completed successfully by the green check mark, meaning the connection has been set up, and the IP address used for this is also displayed. Here at the bottom left you are shown that the configurator has detected 2 DALI I/O modules, and I can go here to switch directly back and forth between the modules online without having to first exit the configurator. And now a connection with the second module has been set up, but since all of my devices are connected to the first module, I have to switch back to the first module. The first step involves addressing of the devices. The system lists the operating units, sensor type 1 and sensor type 2 separately in tabs. The operating units here refer to the electronic ballast, the lights themselves. For this, I go to Random Addressing for new devices. Here, we use only unaddressed devices. As a further option, I can select Identify, which means that addressed devices which are detected are also activated in this process. So now I begin by clicking Start. A request prompt is then displayed, and then addressing is started. You can then notice activity at the lights, and the addressed lights are switched on. So now all 6 lights have been detected, and the addressing process is ended automatically, with the system displaying the devices that have been found. In the next step, my task is to identify the lights myself. This I can do simply by selecting the first light and then clicking up here on Start Localization. The light that was assigned the address 0 during addressing now lights up, or flashes, and I can see by the list that this light is not the first light in the room, but that it is actually the 4th. But since counting begins with 0, the actual address for this light is 3. Changing of the address in the list is purely optional, but I want to do this because later I'll not only have a logical sequence for the names, but also for the addresses. And of course, I then also want to change the names accordingly. For example here, Light 3, and then continue with the next operating unit that is listed. In our setup, this is the last light, that is number 5. I then change the name to match the position. Here, number 0. And the address is also already correct. So this has to be switched, and for the last one, now the address is correct. So that completes the renaming of the lights. The lights are now already shown on the left within the new line. Now I can add a logical folder structure to this, for example by inserting an area. I can then add other areas for the rooms, which is exactly what I'll call this. This could be the main building, and inside, an individual floor. And inside here, the separate rooms. This is really helpful later in case I have to perform servicing or replace a device that is defective. Yes, and here I know that thanks to my logical addressing, light 0, 1, 2, 3 is located in room 1. So I just drag these into room 1, while light 4 and 5 are in room 2. They are also displayed there now, and I can use Localize to check again to ensure that everything is correct here, and can tell by the flashing of the lights that addressing and renaming has been done like I wanted it to be. So now the next step is to assign these lights to our groups and scenes. To do this, we go to the next button, Groups and Scenes. All of my groups and scenes are shown here in a vertical structure. And since I have already clearly sorted the devices myself into rooms, I can simply take the entire room and move it to a group, for example. And now these lights are already assigned to a group. I can also rename the group itself, such as Light Strip 1. Of course, you can have several light strips in one room. Here for the second room, I'll create a further light strip. Giving us two groups now that we can use later individually to switch the lights on and off, or brighten or dim the lights in the individual rooms. The scenes are shown in the right window. Here too I want to define the individual scene for each separate room that I can later activate using the switch. To do this, I first select Room 1 and move it to Scene 0. Here I can pre-select the scene value for this room. I'll just set it to 90%, and as you see, this brightness level is then applied. After this, I would like to reduce the brightness of the last light located near the wall. That would be light 3. As we'll suppose there is a projector screen located at this wall. This allows the scene to be used for providing the ideal lighting in the room for a presentation. And what I do to achieve this is change the brightness level to, let's say, 15%. And then we have a second scene for the second room for which I simply set the brightness level to 66.6%. So now we have finished our tasks with the groups and scenes, and in the next step we can take a look at the configuration of the devices given here. For example, I can again view the default settings for the devices in the list, such as the power on level, which indicates that the initial brightness level is now currently set at 100%. But I can change this setting too, for example to 75%. To now have this new setting transferred to the operating unit ECG, I simply click on Write when I have finished changing these settings. So this concludes the setup and configuring of the ECG. The only things remaining are the sensors. I therefore switch back to Addressing and select Sensor Type 1 as the first item, and again use random addressing. And then I click on Start. The configurator now has to find exactly 4 devices, as we installed a multi-sensor containing 2 sensors for motion and brightness detection in each room. And the configurator now has detected exactly 4 devices. Here are the 2 sensors, each with motion and brightness detection. The only thing still missing here is the information indicating what sensor is located in which room. To obtain this information, I can simply click on Diagnostics. And now I can see the brightness levels online. If I am in room 2, for example, and I move around in the room, the motion sensor responds in the room, which is indicated here. The value on is then displayed, telling me that sensor type 1 is located in room 2. Then I go back to Start and can rename the Sensor Type tab. Multi-Sensor Room 1 and Multi-Sensor Room 2. So now let's look at Sensor Type 2. To do this, I just click on the second tab in this window. Here again, I use random addressing for identifying devices and then click on Start. The system then detects 2 devices. A button coupler, to which 4 buttons or switches can be connected, is located in each room, and this is exactly what is shown. As before, I still do not have any information indicating which of these switches is located in which room. And so I then switch back to Diagnostics and can then see which switch transmits what signal. To do this, I simply go into the room, press the switch, and the system displays switch 1 or switch 2, telling me that this device is in room 2. So then I go back to Start and Addressing, where I can rename the device. Okay, now we have completed the addressing of all the connected devices. I can now perform diagnostics by querying all of the devices using Status Query. Here you can see that the configurator recognizes the status of the devices. This shows, for example, which lights are switched on and what the brightness levels for the lights are. The operating hours are even displayed on the right. If necessary, we can also reset the operating hours, for example, when a light is replaced. I simply select the light and at the top click on Reset Operating Hours. If I want to document successful setup and configuration, I can generate a status report here. This file is later listed simply as an Excel file. And as such, it lists all of the devices with the corresponding folder structure, and we can read off the value or operating hours in the list. And since we've now completed the setup and configuration of the DALI devices, it would be wise to save this now, so that we can use this configuration again when a device is to be replaced, or service performed, for example. And it is also at this point at which we can basically transfer this information to CodeSys version 2.3 so that the lighting devices can be activated. To simplify this transfer, the DALI Configurator is provided with an export function which greatly facilitates my subsequent work for linking within CodeSys. To do this, I just click on Export and can then perform a CodeSys export. What I am basically doing here is generating an export file from the DALI configuration that has been created. This file can then be imported into CodeSys. This file takes into account that special characters such as the German umlaut or spaces that we may have been using in the DALI configurator are not permitted in CodeSys. Again, this is taken into account for the export, and these special characters are eliminated automatically. So the file is saved as an EXP file. I've also prepared a small CodeSys project here into which we can import this file. To do this, I just click on Project in CodeSys and then on Import, and then select the same file we generated. Here, under Resources, I can see as the results that a list of global variables has been imported for both DALI modules, which contains all of the lights and all of the groups with the names we assigned, along with all of the sensors. So this means that I do not have to start naming these items again in CodeSys, but I can take up from there directly and can, here for example using a module, take the same straight from the DALI configurator to read out this type of button interface. And if you use intuitive names for these, it makes everything that much easier. Here I can read out my two buttons. I'm only using the first and second switch for each button right now. Then I can use these two switches again down here to switch the lighting on and off or dim it. And further down I have the scene call-up for Room 1 and Room 2, for which these switches are again evaluated. To control the individual groups, we still need the name of the group, which, if you recall, we obtained from the export file. So these items are listed alphabetically, meaning that my light strip 1 will be located toward the middle of the list. And here, in the second one, we need light strip number 2. Now I have linked these variables directly with CodeSys, and now all I need to do is load the program to the control system and start it when I have completed everything. I can now view the results directly in the setup. So here we have Room 1. I can use the button to switch the lighting on and off, or to brighten or dim it, or I can activate a light scene. In this room, we have the scene set with 90% and 15%. And in the same way, I can switch on the lighting in the second room, or dim it, or activate the lighting scene that we set at 66% brightness. Yes, and what we see here is a system snapshot, and we have basically finished setup and configuration for commissioning. Once we have completed commissioning, we can decide whether we wish to create further documentation under File, for example creating a PDF file that contains the complete documentation for the current configuration. That is exactly what we want to do here. and I'd like to show you how to do this. The PDF file is called up here, and as you can see, all elements and all details have been documented in this file. You can download the WAGO DALI Configurator free of charge from the WAGO website at wago.de.